right, so I've got 650. I don't know if everyone is back yet. Look like we've got a bunch of entries here. Um, so the point of this is a couple fold in terms of getting a chance to explore these in a little bit more detail. One of the things I like about using these sorts of the glossary activity that we did before and using this one is that it allows students to contribute to a body of knowledge, which then can be made available to everybody. So at this point, now that this is part of the class Moodle, um, anyone that wants to look up a couple of examples of any one of these principles can simply come in here and take a look and see what people came up with. I was going through some of the examples, and there were a bunch of good ones in there. So maybe just either about the activity, the database. We had a couple people have some technical issues with using the database. I don't know if anyone else ran into any problems. We had one person with an issue with uploading images, and another person for whom it just seemed like the database didn't like them and was not saving their entries. Did anybody else have any technical issues or any questions about the Gestalt principles themselves? Comments? All right, so good. We're good to go on that. All right. So yeah, this, like I said, graphic design, as any visual artist can tell you, is an entire career all unto itself. So the fact that we are just scratching the surface with it over the course of a single 2.5 hour class, there's obviously a lot more to get into here, but maybe the main takeaway is that, particularly in an online environment where so much of the way that you communicate with your students is through visual representations of what you're trying to teach, graphics, charts, handouts, things like that, that maybe even just having these principles in the back of your mind might help to improve your thinking in terms of when you're designing those sorts of materials. Things to keep in mind, remembering that people tend to look at the whole. I've seen a lot of examples of handouts and workshops and so on where obviously the presenter put a lot of attention on the individual, but when you get the handout and you kind of do that initial processing of it, you kind of give up right off the bat because there's either so much there or it's poorly organized or arranged or so on. So as you go into your Moodles and you start adding content in, the key then is to keep some of this in mind so that the materials that you are creating. All right. So any other comments on this? I don't know, Sandy. I don't mean to pick on you, but knowing that you're an art teacher, is there anything that you like to throw in as something for people to keep in mind, or anyone else who's maybe had some background in doing graphics, graphic design? Words of wisdom. Yeah. Certainly, certain disciplines are obviously um, more graphically oriented. Yeah, definitely. Science is one of those. Interestingly enough, even in music, the musical language that we use, the vocabulary we use, is very graphic in nature, and there's a lot of attention paid to how a page is laid out of music and making sure that people can understand what they're seeing and so on. And that's a whole 1,000-year history of developing a way to represent music through graphics. But yeah, models. I'm sure I can't remember if we have any math teachers here, but obviously getting into graphs and charts and statistics and things like that through math is another big place for this. But even if you're just doing a timeline or something like that in a subject, just keeping in mind, what does it look like? Are you paying attention to the shapes of objects, the grouping of the objects, to the coloring of the objects? So you have too much going on in the background, just to keep in mind. All right. Well, I had a couple of examples that I was going to pull up and have us look at, but I also don't want to keep us late tonight, and I do want to spend a little bit of time going over a couple of web resources related to this. So maybe I'll point out, if you want to, there are 3 design examples that I provided on our Moodle page. And these were, again, just things that I pulled from the website or from the web that were all instructional graphics. And just to maybe take a look at them, I'm not saying that these are good examples or bad examples. They're probably a little bit of both. My first impression of this first graphic is that there's an awful lot going on, and I'm not really sure where I'm supposed to start. But they've obviously paid some attention to grouping. They've got colors and shapes that seem to be pulling information together. But I do feel like that some simplification maybe could have happened here or so on. So if you on your own, if you want to take a look at some of those, maybe we'll come back to them down the road. But I'll leave those design examples up if you want to take a look at those just on your own and maybe imagine if you were grading them as an instructional content, what sort of a grade would you give them, or how effective do you think the graphics would be, and what would you do differently, and things like that. So what I wanted to finish up, the last main topic tonight before we talk about the homework for next week, is that how do we create these? And going back to our first meeting, this class, in my mind, maybe aside from Moodle, just because we're using that as our main platform, is not really about pushing any one piece of software to achieve any one goal. There are many, many ways to do any of this, and certainly graphic design is one of those areas. If you have one of the CCSU laptops, I think those have the whole Adobe suite on them, which includes Adobe Illustrator or InDesign, which is for graphic design. It's got Photoshop, which you can also do graphic design through. So you can certainly do that. I had pointed out that I made the little graphic for the top of our Moodle. I just did that in Microsoft Word and put together a clip art image and some text, and then took a little screen capture of that image and did it that way. So it can be as simple as using Word. But I did want to also point out maybe sort of the in-between. If you don't want to spend a lot of money on a program like the Adobe software, but you want to have a little bit more functionality than what Word can give you, one of the things that is happening now is that all of these companies are figuring out ways to move software onto the web. And in many cases, that software is free, or at least is relatively inexpensive. It's usually, a lot of times, they're based on simply getting an account and being able to do things that way. And then a lot of times they'll offer different levels depending on how detailed you want to get. So I just compiled together here a few of these, and I just want to take a couple of minutes. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on any single one of them, but just to give you a sense of what's out there. My one criteria for ones that I wanted to suggest, there we go, is that these do all have completely free levels to them. So if you are not interested in spending any money, all of these will allow you to do certain things in terms of graphic design without having to spend any money. Some of them are a little bit more open than others. Some of them want to step you up to buying content. But they all, in one shape or another, are based on doing graphic design through a web interface. So the first one is called Design Wizard, and a lot of these will start off with a big page, something like this. That's create things quickly and easily, and usually I look for the word free. Most of these, in fact, I think all four of the ones I'm showing you, you do have to sign up for an account, but the accounts are all free. So I'm just going to quickly log in here. Yeah, what did I do? There we go. Okay. So the way that this one works is a lot of these will have a lot of similar tools. A lot of times they'll give you some template sorts of options to start off with. A lot of them have tutorials if you want to learn how to use their websites. They'll have a lot of information there. So this one starts off with what sizes they have. They sort of work from that perspective. But I can create a new design. And from there, a lot of these, what I tend to do is I start looking for the same tools, because a lot of these will have the same tools. They may be arranged differently and so on, but typically somewhere on a sidebar or maybe across the top will be the tools that you have. So this particular site actually gives you some video backgrounds you can use. And again, some of them are free and some of them you have to pay for. So they give you video designs. They have some video content, which again are sort of stock video footage types of items. They also have a similar thing for images. So if you want to start with something that's already designed and then tweak it. But then really beyond that is where you get to just build something from scratch. So there's a library of images. You can upload your own images if you've got a particular thing you want to add into your graphic. You've got usually a shape library. So I can create a shape out here, and then you can manipulate it in various ways. And so on, changing colors and all sorts of options like that. Usually they also offer text. In this case, they've got a bunch of sort of pre-formed text. You've also got sizes and fonts. You can upload your own things. So really, it's providing you a pretty basic set of tools for creating content. Melissa, what dimensions to choose? That is mainly going to be answered in terms of what platform you're going to put the image on. Generally speaking, if it's something that's going into video actually has a much lower resolution than print images do. If it's an image that you're actually going to have printed out and want it printed out on paper size, that needs to be a pretty high resolution in terms of the shape. Let's see, the videos that I upload onto our Moodle site are 800 by 600 pixels. And that seems to be a pretty good size for a piece of content on a Moodle page. So, sometimes it takes a little trial and error to see in terms of where it's going to be displayed. One of the websites I'm going to show you does what they call scalable vector graphics. And those are a little different because those can get resized to any size and they don't degrade in quality. So I'm sorry, that's not a more specific answer, but usually make sure that you know where it's going first and then take a look at the shape and the size from there.
Yeah, I was just noticing, Professor Mello, that like when you got on the website, it gave you like, do you want to use a poster size or a video?
Yep.
And like they gave you all of these, a tweet, a banner, a this, a that. So just for like our purposes, like just making like a graphic for, even just making a graphic that we want to put on a worksheet for a student or something like that. I don't really, I'm not the best at interpreting when it says like, 1500 px by 300 px or this, or like,
Yeah.
that way it transfers onto, basically I guess a sheet piece of paper, even though we're using the internet. I don't know. Or like when you want to make a graphic, how do you know if when they view it, it's not going to be too blown up for their screen?
Right.
You know what I mean? That's something that I'm not good with that.
Yeah, and it's actually it's a good question, and it's an unfortunately kind of a complicated one, because even if you pick a pixel size, so for instance, here it's saying a Facebook post should be 1200 by 900 pixels. So that must be some guideline from Facebook in terms of image sizes. But different people will set their screen resolutions differently. Some people like to blow up their screen so they can read it better. Other people like to have a lot of stuff on their screen, so they shrink them. So even from user to user, it can get really tricky to know, if I make it this size, how will they actually see it? A lot of the modern websites, because they're designed to work on mobile devices and on desktop devices and on tablet devices, whatever size you put in, they get pretty good at resizing the image depending on how the person's viewing it. So, generally speaking, I err a little on the side of making the image bigger than it needs to be, because an image will generally still look okay if you have to shrink it. But if you make an image small and then have to blow it up, they tend to get pixelated. So that's maybe more of a general guideline. Print, then, I mean, print gets into a whole different thing, because when it actually gets printed on a piece of paper, that resolution has to be a lot higher than even a computer screen. So a lot of times when people print something out from a computer screen, it shows up small on actual print. So, but yeah, a little trial and error. And if you're using a particular platform, you'll sort of learn what sizes look good. And a lot of these you can come back and resize them. So if you've created something and you upload it and then it doesn't look good, you can come back and resize it, or resize it within the app. So yeah, so that's, Design Wizard is one option I came across. They, like I said, one thing that this one offered that I didn't see much on the others was the option to use video. So you can use video backgrounds and create little moving images as well. It's not really a video editor, but it can use video content as part of the image. So that was one that I looked at. Another one is Canvas, but without the S on the end. So let me go in.